Hi, I'm Aiman. Well, welcome back to one of my auto repair videos. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install the AC compressor for a 2010 Honda Insight. Now, we've already done a video on how to remove the AC compressor, so go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. In this video, we're going to be installing it. With this one, we're going to be using a remanufactured part instead of the old one, but of course, you can still use the old one if you don't need to replace it. In this case, our pulley was broken on our previous one. So we're going to be reinstalling this entirely, just so that we can ensure a smooth ride for my brother Oscar. Let's get right to it. The first thing we need to do is we need to put the bolts back onto this AC compressor. And the reason why is because we need to fit it into the, let me go from underside. We need to fit it into this cavity here. And it's going to be very hard to do this because first off, you can see here that although they have a lip where you can sort of rest the AC compressor on, it doesn't look like it's big enough that it's going to be easy to do so. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise the AC compressor up to the level where it's able to be installed, and then screw the bolts in. And what you can also do is you can have two people work on it together. And that way you can install the AC compressor. But on my channel, I always like to think of methods that allow one person to get the job done. And for one person to get the job done, we're going to be using the jack. Very long-winded, I know. But we're actually going to be putting this rusted bolt right here. This one was the hardest one to take out of the bolts. And the reason why is you can see it's kind of broken and it's kind of rusted. We're going to put this one closest to the outside, and that's the bottom left one, just in case it breaks. And we can drill it out easily. So put the rest of them in there. The reason that we're putting these bolts here now is because if we try to put it later, and you may have seen this when we were removing it, it's actually very hard to put in the top bolts through the fan radiator, and you have to sort of finagle the bolts. So it's better just to put all the bolts in first, raise them up, and then screw them in. Okay, so we're going to put the AC compressor onto the jack. Like I said, this would be better to do with two people, but this is just a way of allowing you to do it with one person. Now you want to position it so that when you raise the jack, it gets in a position to meet the cavity where it's supposed to go into. And that means you have to sort of like prepare for that arc that the jack is going to go up. First, I'm going to just raise it, just to get a sense of where I'm going. And then I can readjust the position so that I can position the AC compressor. Now we're going to reposition it. I'm going to make this perpendicular to this cavity. It looks like when I raise this up, it's going to arc this way. It looks like it's already in the right position, so that when I lift it up, it goes into the spot it's supposed to. When I lift it up, it looks like it's going to hit the corner, so also be careful for that. Okay, so let me loosen that a bit, because it looks like it hit the corner. Now I'm going to pull this back. Alright, so you get the idea. Eventually when you get high enough, you'll see that the AC compressor really has nowhere to fall. It can't fall in that direction. It can't fall in this direction. Maybe the only way it could fall is in this direction here. That's because there's a bit of a hole there. But right here, it should be pretty secure, and it will allow you to position the compressor so that you can screw in the bolts. Alright, so we have the top bolt in. We positioned it in. And now what we can do is you can move the jack, lower the jack, and move it out of the way so that we can tighten the bottom. I feel it going in. Yep, it's in. Alright, so I got both the bottom bolts in. Before we go further, I'm going to, hold on. So the way you can tell that they're in is that if you pull on them, the bolt doesn't come out. This one, I pull back on it, doesn't come out. So that way, we can tell it's in. Sometimes when you put in a bolt and you can't see where it's going, you would think that's in when it's not really. So just make sure that you pull on it to make sure that's in. Alright, so now we're going to tighten these bolts alternating so that it goes in evenly. And as for torque, can you see? And as for torque, we're actually not able to fit a torque wrench in here. So the measure that we're going to use is you want to keep tightening this until it gets, you know, somewhat tight, snug. And then you want to do a quarter turn. Okay, I'm gonna alternate over here. All right, so now it's very tight, so we're going to do 1/4 of a turn. If you're not strong enough, 1/8 of a turn is okay. And I actually can't reach it for it. Oh, there we go. So that's 1/4 of a turn. That should be about 30 foot-pounds, and they're for bolts, so this should be in place pretty securely. Now, if you're afraid about the torque, like you're worried that you didn't torque it enough, you can always use thread locker or Loctite. It's not required, and I mean, like, if they wanted to make you torque it right, they would have made the more space for a torque wrench. So I mean, just tighten it until it's snug fit. I'm also going to do it to the right side, and then after this I have to go onto the bottom to tighten it from the bottom. I'm not using Loctite because I think I'm super strong. So after this, after we've tightened these bolts, then we're going to put back the cable and then continue with the hose and the rest of the fasteners. Okay, there we go. Okay, it's tight. Let's do this 1/4 of a turn. And there we go. So this looks pretty sturdy. And while I'm here, the problem with our original pulley was that it wobbled a lot. This one doesn't look like it wobbles at all. And the AC compressor itself doesn't look wobbly. So that means that we've secured it very well with these bolts. Next step is to take a look at these cables. We're going to reattach this cable to the harness. So get closer for that angle. This cable goes into that harness. Okay, so we just want to angle it. Make sure that this little lever is facing towards the rear of the car, and just slide it upwards until you hear that click. Next step is there's this little I don't know if you would call it a cable tie, but it goes around the cable. You want to slide the cable into there, flip the this latch and put it back down, and lock it in place. Now, actually, wait. This might just be similar to a zip tie in that you can't actually keep it closed like this. Wait. Oh no, this is broken. So never mind. So you don't latch this back. If you want to keep this down, if you want to keep the cable tied, then you can always use a zip tie. It's a classic. Or you can just use another fastener with a ring, a fastener for zip tie that you can get for very cheap. But that fastener, that cable should be in place. Now we can turn our attention to the top. Okay, so next step is we're going to be installing the O-rings, because before we install the hoses, we need to make sure that we replace these O-rings so that the seals are maintained. I mean, I know some people keep the O-rings, but it's best practice to just remove them. So take a hook, slide it under, get it under there, and just pull it out. So you want to take your O-ring and you want to compare it with a set of O-rings that you have. This one's aftermarket, very cheap to replace these. This one looks about maybe a 14 or a 15. Let's try a 15 first. Looks a bit too big. Okay, looks like it's a 14. So we're going to replace this with a 14, but first, actually, let me put that down. We're going to get the other O-ring. So let me put this down as well. We're going to get the O-ring from the high pressure hose. We're going to pull that out. And we're also going to excavate that. And pull it out. All right. This one looks like on 11 or a 12. Let's try 11. You can still see the 11. It looks like 11's too small. There's probably a 12. Ah, perfect fit. So it looks like we're going to replace this with a 12. Now, before we insert these O-rings, we need to oil them. So we got this PAG oil. We're going to pour some oil in the cap, and then we're going to dip the O-rings into there. Alright, so now we're going to start with the high pressure hose, so the smaller one. We're going to take it and we're going to dip it into the cap. Let's get it over. Let's get that oil all over it. We take it back. Then we're going to place it onto the high pressure hose. Now make sure you clean the inside of the high pressure hose just in case. And then we're going to slide it back on. There we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put the high pressure hose back into the its corresponding receiver. So I was noticing that this looks a bit too big when you put it on. This is a 12, by the way. It's better to go smaller because smaller O-rings can stretch to fit bigger receivers, but bigger ones are always going to be loose and they're not going to create that seal. So instead of going for the 12 that I just dropped, we're going to go for an 11. Okay, get that oil all over it. And we're going to put it on. Stretch it around. Looks like it fits pretty darn good. Okay, let me just pat that down. Next step is we're going to take the cap out of this hole. We're going to do the high pressure first because it gives us more room to do the if we do the low pressure first, we're not going to have a lot of room to do the high pressure. So pull this out. My hands are a bit greasy. Oh, by the way, the AC compressor comes with the oil that's needed for already inside it, so you don't have to worry about that. Or maybe you might have to worry about that if you get a different part, but in our case, we already have the oil inside. So now we're going to take one of the screws. They're identical, so it doesn't really matter. We're going to take one of them, angle the hose in. Be careful that the O-ring doesn't drop, but it looks like it won't drop anyway. Angle it in there. Make sure it's fit inside snugly, and then insert the bolt. Okay. I'm gonna block your view so that I can make sure it goes into the hole. Alright, so now that we put it in a few threads, we're going to tighten it with this wrench here, with this extension. Make sure you have a wobbly extension on it so that you can actually reach the screw. I mean, not the screw, the bolt. While we're tightening this, we wanted to push down on the hose to make sure that the seal actually, fits inside. And we're going to keep tightening. And I'm going to hold the wrench like this just so I don't over tighten it. So keep pushing down on the hose while you're tightening it to ensure the seal stays in the right place, and you should be good to go. Now it's tight. Alright, so we have the high pressure done. Let's do the low pressure hose. I'm going to take our O-ring, dip it in there. I'm going to recover it with my hook. Even though, I could probably just put my fingers in there, doesn't matter. Let me put this down. Take the low pressure hose and slide it on. There we go. So let's push this around to see if it's loose or not. It looks like it's pretty reasonably tight. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have to replace this. Like I said before, if you're worried, just use a size smaller just in case. But let me just put this back on. Just in case it gets spilled, I don't want to have an accident on my hands. And then we're going to position this and put it in. So let me take the cap out. That's what the cap looks like. And now we can angle this in. So be careful of that O-ring. Position it in. The hose naturally goes in the way it's supposed to. And then you will just want to twist this adapter, this metal piece a bit, just so the bolt goes in the right hole. The bolt goes in the hole. Okay, twist that a few turns. Might have to adjust that. Okay, so now it's in there. I try pulling it out. It stays in. Now we can tighten it with the extension. Like I said before, when we tighten it, you want to press down on the hose just to make sure it's properly tightened. All right, for this one, you don't really need a wobbly extension. You can just slide it in through here. And now I'm going to hold this down. And I'm going to do this closer to the center of the wrench, just so I don't over tighten it. My dad figures it's probably about 16 foot-pounds. And when he loosened these originally, didn't feel like they were very tight. So you probably don't need to tighten them that much. Okay, should be good to go. Wait, maybe not. All right, so my dad just told me to make sure that you guys take note of the angle that you tighten it. Your extension should be going under the high pressure hose instead of up here. If it's up here, that means you're likely crossing threads. So just make sure that when you're tightening it, that your wrench is positioned up here. It shouldn't be too much. It shouldn't be too heavy because we're talking 16 foot-pounds here. And as you can see here, I can barely move it. Therefore, it's tight. There we go, nice. Okay, wait, does that mean, I'm pretty sure that means that we've installed the AC compressor. If we go back to the previous video, I'm pretty sure we started at this very step. So wow, so now, next step is you need to put your belt back on. And we'll probably do that in a separate video, or maybe this video, we'll see. And then put your tire back on, unjack the car, and you should be good to go. Oh, and also the battery, make sure you put that back on before you test drive it. And also, for the serpentine belt, now this is interesting. Before, the problem was that our pulley was wobbly, and also this idler pulley was also wobbly. And we're guessing that because the AC compressor pulley was wobbly, it caused the belt to wobble, which caused the pulley to wobble, and that caused the pulley to break here, the idler pulley. So I'm guessing that it would be a good idea to replace the serpentine belt. And if you do a job like this, it is best practice to replace the serpentine belt, but also the serpentine belt looks pretty new. Just look at it. It doesn't look like there's any reason to replace it, so we're just going to replace it. So this is my first time installing the serpentine belt on this Honda Insight. I've done it on other cars, but this is going to be my first time doing it here. Alright, so that was a very simple installation. Make sure that you connect your battery back before you start using your car again. This goes without saying that when you always the same person. This time I'm pretty sure that was a car that just passed us. Usually it's a motorcycle. Make sure you connect the battery. It goes without saying that whenever you're working on a car, you should disconnect the battery. If I didn't say that before, make sure you disconnect the battery before you remove the serpentine belt. After you're done with that, put the battery back on, and you're good to go. Alright, so the idler pulley has been replaced. The AC compressor has been replaced, and that includes the pulley. And we've cleaned up the entire workspace, so now let's turn it on and have the moment of truth. Let's see if there's still a sound. Alright, so we're going to put refrigerant in. As you can see on the side, we got the clutch engaged. and all that refrigerant is getting pumped into the system. And if you go into the car, you can actually feel that it's cold air. Hey, Matt. So it looks like the AC is working now. We're actually going to replace this right here. This is the desiccant, and it goes on the side of the radiator here. We're actually going to replace this before. It's part of the whole AC system, and it's positioned next to the condenser. I can't really point it out, and it's in front of the radiator. But to replace the dryer, we have to basically take out the entire radiator, which is going to take out, a few hours. And since we think that we've already done a pretty good job, my dad's going to go on a hunch and say that this car is already doing pretty well. I mean, it's 200,000 miles. We don't have to replace the dryer just yet. But we'll see in the future if we need to replace it. But we're hoping that we don't need to replace it. And if we do need to replace it, then we have another video to do. But for now, you can see that the car works. The AC works now, and there's no noise. All we have to do is put the refrigerant back, and we're good to go. So I'm Aiman, and today we diagnosed and solved the problem with the noise coming from our engine by reinstalling both the idler pulley, which is wobbly, and also the AC compressor clutch pulley. I mean, not clutch, AC compressor pulley, which was also wobbly. And in the end, finally, we have no sounds coming from the engine. So thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and look at our videos on EyeOnAiman, especially the videos on this Honda Insight. This was a very interesting series to do. We have tons of videos that we did just from this one incident with solving the noise problem. So go check them out, and I'll see you there. For now, I'm Aiman, and signing out.